Hello everyone, welcome back to Ion Radio. My name is John and today is going to be another episode of the Backseat Admiral. I'm just going to pause for a second and wait for chat to catch up to tell me if there's sound or not. As soon as I have sound, then I will be moving forward. So, hopefully everyone's having a good day out there. I'm excited to be doing this again, and I hope you enjoy what we're going to be talking about. Okay, perfect. Thank you for letting me know we have sound. So, I'll just go over the format once again, just because this is just the second time we've done it. But Backseat Admiral is all about me doing different segments. The first part of the segment will be me talking something about strategy or something about the game that either new players or experienced players can learn from. And then we're going to dive into the last episode of Star Wars Armada that we released. And we can then talk about fleet builds, how we would change things, what we would have done or what we were thinking during the game. And then throughout the whole thing, I'll be answering questions from you guys if you have anything specifically you want me to answer. So let's go ahead and get started then. So today I'm going to be talking about the attack sequence. We get questions all the time in our Discord, on our YouTube channels, and I see questions on the attack sequence being asked on other Discords and Facebook and Reddit and things like that. I think it's very important to understand the attack sequence and follow the attack sequence, because then it alleviates a lot of issues that you can have while playing the game. So the attack sequence is technically divided into 5 different phases, and then inside each of those phases there's a whole bunch of different phases that we'll talk about in a second. So the first section is declare an attack, the second is roll attack dice, the third is resolve attack effects, the fourth is defend, spend defense tokens, and then the fifth is resolve damage, and then the sixth is this little one that it's like declare additional targets against squadrons. We won't be touching as much on that one. I'll explain it though when we get there. So the first big thing is to declare targets. And so that is declaring your hull zone to attack a different hull zone of another ship. So I actually have some slides, and I'm going to then point out little things to keep in mind when you're declaring a hull zone, because at this time you're going to be checking line of sight, so that's the yellow dot to yellow dot, and looking for obstruction that way. And then also deciding if things are in arc and in attack range. All 3 of those measurements are technically different, and they all have to take place before an attack can be made legally. So let me transition over to this, and I'll let you guys in chat take a look at this, and we can talk about it. So here's the Star Destroyer, and we have a Venator. And between the two of them, I'm focusing primarily on their side shots. So the question is, do these two ships have line of sight to each other? And at what range would they be? And are they in arc? So I'll give you a second, and you guys can start responding to that in the comments. So if you look at this, clearly the front arcs, you can connect the dots very easily together. So this isn't very difficult here. The fronts can shoot into each other's fronts. But the question is, can the sides shoot into each other? So I'm going to go ahead and start, because I already have the pictures with lasers, so we'll jump over to it. So this is the line of sight between the two dots. As you can see, traced from here to there. And so they do have line of sight to each other. So then the next question that the declare target step is, are they in arc? So this is the Venator's arc. You can see that it is not, the Star Destroyer is not inside that arc. now we're going to jump over to the Star Destroyer. And the Star Destroyer does just barely have that Venator in its arc. But what range is it? These ships are extremely close range. What range do you think it is from this side arc of the ISD to the side of the Venator? I'm going to just wait a little bit because this is where some people make mistakes. So, according to the rules, let me flip over. I have all the rules pulled up. The attacker ship, your attack range is your range in your hull zone. So it is actually long range. So if you follow where medium range is across this arc line, which is really difficult to honestly do when you're trying to take a picture, the part of the Venator that touches the laser is actually at long range. So even though the ships are practically running into each other, this side shot would be a long range shot. And that's why it's important to go through each of the steps in order. Do we have line of sight? Are you an arc? Where does that arc take us for range? So this is one of the things that's difficult for us when we're filming, because we just say, hey, this is this shot, because Ken and I have already gone through and measured everything, and then sometimes camera angles make it look really, really wonky. But yeah, so like this is a long range shot. It's kind of nuts. So I have a couple more examples just to show. I'll go a little bit faster through them. So you have a Munificence here, and you have a CR-70, and I'm going to measure the line of sight again. And dot to dot, you can go through your own hull zones. You cannot go through the opponent's hull zone. So this CR-90 does not have a shot at the side of this Munificent. But this Munificent does have a shot from the side to the front. So it does have line of sight to this, from the side to the front of the CR-90. So we're going to then flip forward. And I think that's the same picture. Cool. And then if you follow the arc line, it just barely clips this. So this Munificent can shoot front to front and side to front of this CR-70, but the CR-70 can only attack the front of this Munificent. Another example here, this is just a made-up world that a Victory somehow chased down a ship and is attacking and right behind an MC-80. So if we draw the line of sight again, you can see that this Victory cannot shoot the side of this MC-80 because its line of sight dot to dot will go through this hull zone line right here. But this MC-80 can shoot, if it's in arc, from the side to the front. And when we do the measurement of the arc, you can see, yes, it actually does clip the front of that Victory. So just keep in mind that you need to measure all three of these things to determine if the line of sight is proper or not. Let me jump back to just me and switch some cards around real fast. Okay, so that is, for the most part, the first step, which is declaring target. So when you measure, you can decide if you can declare an attack or not. Then the next step is forming an attack pool by gathering dice and rolling those dice. Technically, these are two different steps, even though that they're talked about at the same time. And why this is important is that there are card timings that will talk about before something happens and then after something happens, and each of those windows need to take place. So one of the newer cards that came out with the Clone Wars is Thermal Shields. Let me pull that up. And here we have it here. So while defending, after the attacker gathers dice, so in step 2, the attacker gathers dice, and then they roll the dice. So this card stops it right after you gather dice. And the dice that they're specifically talking about is what dice are at range, which is why it's important to measure what is in range at that arc. And then any ability that will add dice to the armament value. So an example of adding dice to an armament value, which is different than adding dice in the modify step, would be like spinal armaments. Let me pull that card up. Spinal armaments says the battery armament from your front and rear hull zones are increased by 1 dice. So this takes place during the gather dice step. So let's say you slap this on a victory. A victory's normal front would be 3 red dice. With the spinal, it would be 4, which would be gathered before thermal shields goes off. And then thermal shields takes place after the attackers gather their dice, but before they roll them. So you have to allow for that small little window. And then after thermal shields is when obstruction takes place. Because if you look at the rules reference, obstruction takes place specifically at this point, before they roll their dice. So now we have these multiple windows inside this one sentence that says, gather a dice pool and roll the dice. So now we have gather the dice pool before and after the dice pool, roll the dice before and after the dice are rolled, and each of those have specific cards that are timed during that effect. Which, this is why it becomes confusing and why it's important to follow specifically the steps as you go through. Another card that gets talked about a lot in reference to all of this is Intel Officer. And Intel Officer, people make a lot of mistakes on because of its timing as well. So if you look at Intel Officer, while attacking, after you roll your attack pool, you may exhaust this card to choose 1 defense token. If this token is spent during this attack, discard that token. So Intel Officer takes place during the gather and roll step, during the roll attack dice, right after you roll. But before you can modify or spend anything, which is the next step. So if all of these things were in here, I would gather my dice, and with that I would add in the spinal. Then the other player can declare, because now I've gathered my dice, thermal shields, and I have to remove 50% of the dice according to the other player. Then I roll my dice, and at that exact moment after I roll it, before I touch the dice or do anything else, that is exactly when I have to use Intel Officer. If not, then I can't use Intel Officer because that has now passed. So that's the roll step. And then we move on to resolve attack effects. And during the resolve attack effects, this is when we can reroll dice, add dice such as, let me pull up another card. Swivel mount. Swivel mount, if you read it, it is an add effect. Let me find where it says. Right here. The add 1 dice to your color of any color that's in the attack pool from adjacent hull zone, blah, 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 blah. So this add 1 dice means that it's a modification, and it takes place during the resolve attack effects step, compared to spinal, which is increase the armament, which takes place during the gather dice effect. So there's a whole list of things that can take place and are considered to be resolve attack effects, such as re-rolling, you can concentrate fire tokens, any dice or card effect that says you re-roll, adding, such as this card swivel mount, changing, there's cards that allow changing, such as the TRCs, just flip it to a double. Canceling, there are cards that say that you can place a dice, but then you have to cancel it, which takes place at this time. Or Martuk says that you cancel, which is taking place at this time. Replace, you can flip things out. Exchange, set, or remove. There are a whole bunch of card effects that take place in this window. And during this window, the player, the attacker, can choose whatever order they want to do that in. And the reason why this is important is, let's say if I'm attacking at long range with this card, swivel mounted batteries, I can technically throw my red dice forward and then add a black dice in. And because the black dice is now in my pool, I could concentrate fire in an additional black dice. But if I were to do that in the opposite order, if I had 3 red dice in my pool, if I concentrate fire right now, that means I can only add a red dice because that's the only color that's in my pool. So you have to be very careful of the timing on that. And then this is also when you spend accuracies. And when you spend an accuracy, you actually remove it from your pool to cancel the defensive token. And one of the reasons why this is important to actually do is because if you have cards that do like re-roll your entire pool, you can spend out your accuracies and then re-roll your entire pool, and your accuracies already count, and then you re-roll just what's remaining in your dice pool. And that could be very, very useful if you're hunting for accuracies, or you're just afraid everything is going to come up blank, which is usually what I'm more concerned about. So then the next step after this step is the resolve defense token step, which is where the defender declares redirects, evades, contains, salvos, braces, and scatters. I'm not necessarily going to go into specifically what they all do, because that could be a video all of it on themselves, but there's a few things that I would like to point out for these at this time. And they are: the evade takes place immediately. So if you were going to declare any of these in any order, I would start with evade, because evade takes place right now during it. So you can either immediately cancel out a dice, or you could see what that reroll comes up as to see if you want to spend any of your other tokens or what the results were. So spend it, get more information, then spend the rest of your tokens. Also of note is, if at this stage during the spend defense tokens step, if the attacker has rerolled into an accuracy, they can no longer spend it, because the previous step is when they can spend accuracies. So if you're playing a Sloan player and they're attacking your ship, and you force them to reroll a dice, and that dice comes up by accuracies, they cannot then spend that accuracy to make you spend one of your defense tokens, because that step for them is done. They cannot affect any of the dice at this time. Other things to note, and when we get to resolve damage, this will make more sense. When you declare a redirect, you actually have to declare what hull zone you're redirecting to. And this becomes very important with other cards and critical effects. So the next phase of this is resolve damage. And at this time is when all the rest of the defense tokens kind of take place in a lot of the defense cards, and you total how much damage is actually done. And something that newer players don't always get right away, this is the time that the attacker declares what critical effect they're going to be using. And the standard critical effect is the first damage card that's dealt to the ship is dealt face up. That is always on, or is always an option for the player to take. But you can also declare special cards, and I'm going to pull one up for us so we have it. Such as assault photon torpedoes. Sorry, that's the Star Trek in me. Proton torpedoes, not photon. The assault proton torpedoes critical effect says exhaust this card to deal 1 face-up damage card to the defender. So at the start of the resolve damage step, I, as the attacker, get to declare it. This is what's going to take place. That immediately happens, and that has nothing to do with the damage or cards that are really else been played. So that player will immediately then flip over a critical damage card, which becomes very, very important when you're declaring hull zones, because let's say if I was attacking a side of an ISD which has 3 shields, and the front has 4 shields, and I hit you with an assault proton torpedo, and you flip up projector misaligned, then the front of that Star Destroyer will lose all 4 of its shields because of that card, because it's the hull zone with the most. And if you declared a redirect, and you said that you were going to redirect to that front hull zone, that decision's already been made, and you can no longer then redirect because there's no shields left there. Or there's other cards that will allow a player to decrease shields around a ship And if that's the case, then you as the attacker player, of course, will go after the hull zone that they redirect to, because that makes sense, because then it reduces the amount that they can redirect. Something else in this step that I would like to talk about is that the damage icons, critical, double, hit, crit, double, all equal 1 damage. This isn't X-Wing that each of the criticals matter. It only matters when you're triggering a critical if the crit is in the pool as a whole. So let's say if I rolled 5 black dice and got 5 double hits, which are hit crits, I can still only trigger 1 critical card. It's not each of those criticals get to do something, like each of those will get to do a face-up damage card, or I can trigger assault proton torpedoes multiple times. It just all counts as damage, and then you look when you're triggering a critical, can I trigger that based on what my critical effects are? So I think that's kind of important, but kind of summarizes the whole of what the attack sequence is and why it's important to follow it. The very last step of this is technically declare additional squadron targets, and I'm not touching super much on this because when you attack squadrons or declare that this hull zone is going to flak, you can flak every single squadron that is in that hull zone. And you measure from each of the fighters, and you measure line of sight to each of the fighters and determine what type of dice that you can roll against it. And you just repeat the steps again. So when you get to step 6, if you're flacking fighters and there's still other fighters to go, you jump back up to the top of the order and you go back through it for each of those fighters that are in the zone until you either A, don't want to attack any more fighters, or B, you're done attacking all the fighters in there. So that's pretty much the summary of the attack sequence. And most questions that people have, like for timing, like does Overload Pulse exhaust all their tokens? Well, when does a blue critical effect go off? It goes off in the resolve damage step, which is step 5. And when does the defender get to do their stuff? Step 4. So the defender can still use all of their tokens that they want before Overload Pulse goes off, because Overload Pulse goes off in 5. Most of the cards pretty much specifically say when their timing window is, and thankfully with the AMG forum now, they're specifically going in and putting what phase that goes into. And that's really good for us players, because then there's no question of when we can trigger it. Like, for example, the... what's it called? The B2 battle droids. There was a lot of questions on when that card could specifically trigger. Is it when you declare the attack? Could you do it during step 1 and then, obstruction and everything eliminate the attack, but I still got my B2 off because it's not very clear. But they actually timed it, so then it is now a resolve attack effect card. Great. Now we know exactly when it works and how it works. So let's see. Does anyone have any questions on that? Because, well, it's not that complicated. There's a lot of different steps that you can do, like what we were talking about with the roll attack step. There's roll it. It's just a sentence. Gather the dice pool and roll those dice. Sounds super simple, but now we have like a before, and then we have an after, and then we have a before and after, depending on what side of it's gathering or if it's rolling that it does, and it becomes a bit complicated, and sometimes you have to know the other player's cards because you have to allow them that window to trigger things. So let's look over at chat and see what they have to say so far. Yeah, so technically it's closest cardboard to cardboard that's in arc for measuring attack range, which, like I demonstrated, those ships are like basically on top of each other, ramming each other, and technically it's long range, and just the way it is, it's always frustrating when you, as like if I was the ISD player, and I'm like, yes, I can just hammer you at close range, and then it's like, oh crap, I don't want to shoot a ship at long range, that's less dice, and your defense tokens with evades are going to do more. And that's super annoying. Yeah, the measuring becomes really iffy, and like, thankfully, Ken and we do most of our measuring off screen, so you don't see us like discussing it and like lasering it. And honestly, like 50% of the time, I always laser myself in the eye, even though that it's clear that the one end's the laser. But you guys don't really see us doing a lot of that. But like in a tournament and things like that, it is sometimes very important to measure and maybe call in a judge to measure, because line of sight gets really winky and wonky, and range and distances. And sometimes when things land on obstacles, they do what I just love, which is that spin, because they have that plastic block in the bottom, which is always fun to just spin on an obstacle. So when a ship lands, a lot of times, like at least Ken and I do this in tournaments too, we talk about immediately what is in line of sight and what is not in line of sight and what is in arc, because as you move your shield dials, the ships will shift all around. So sometimes it's nice to talk about, like, yes, this is in arc. We both agree that it's in arc. So then when you start doing shield damage and things like that, and the ship's suddenly turning, no, we can go back to that moment. Yes, it was in line of arc. Line of sight and in arc at this time, and most players will respect that and honor that. Sometimes it's just important to pause for a second and see what that is. You're very welcome. That's actually why I did this. My idea for the strategy is I have like a lot of ideas for people who want like higher strategy, but I honestly think it's really important to build building blocks, like last week talking about what type of player you are. So if you know what type of player you are, different strategies and different building and rules then make more sense, because that's how you approach the game. So we are approaching the game, and now we're getting into the fundamentals of the game, which the attack sequence is one of the very big sequences for Armada. That's when you're doing all the fun stuff, which is just rolling handfuls of dice, and it's very important to understand exactly how those go on, so then you and your opponent are communicating in the same language at this proper time of when card effects go off. It makes it so then there's less mistakes. Okay. So, just to clarify for Michael, his question is, can you clarify the spend evade versus discard evade for double effect? Possible to just spend, see what comes up from reroll, then decide whether to affect a different dice by discarding? So no, you cannot. So you declare what you're doing, and then the opponent does it. So if I have an evade, I can spend it to make you do whatever, reroll, discard a dice, or I can spend discard it to make you do double. I can't spend it, then see what comes up, and then do something again, because technically that's doing it twice. It would be all at once for telling the opponent what to do. So if I'm attacking you at short range with an ISD and you're a CR90, and you want me to do something with 2 dice, you have to at that time discard it. Discard it to have it eliminated. Hint, maybe next week we'll be seeing a defense token talk through. Yeah, it can cause a lot of contention, the steps, because it seems simple, but then there's a lot of things that are inside of it. Okay. So that is pretty much all I have for that strategy talk. I'm going to reset my stuff real fast, and then I'm going to dive into this week's match. And honestly, I'm going to be talking more about Ken's fleet, to be completely honest, than my own fleet. And I'll explain to you guys why. Okay. So, big spoiler, if you haven't seen the episode, you should go watch it. but I'm going to discuss the episode. So this week we have Maydeen, played by Ken, and his MC-30s against Vader, and I brought Vader on an interdictor with a whole bunch of onagers. And those of you that have watched the channel, I'm very vocal on I do not like onagers. I do not like them at all. I do not like them in a box. I do not like them in socks. I do not like them. But Ken specifically asked me to play an onager list because he wanted to see what his fleet can do against it. And that's what I did. So this is the full overview of it, and I have it nicely so that my picture's blocking it. So give me one sec. That's fine. So I have an interdictor, and on it I have Darth Vader, Commander Vanto, Gravity, Relift. Actually, I can just go to this. Here we go. So I have a suppressor, refit, Darth Vader, because I want rerolls because my dice hate me, and onagers want rerolls too to maximize the amount of damage that you're doing. And Commander Vanto, because this is supposed to be like a doctor interdictor, so I can use Vanto to get whatever tokens I need, and then I can just be doing engineering to power projection experts. Grav Shift Reroute allows me to move obstacles, which you'll see when I get to my objectives. It was part of the plan. Targeting Scramblers, because if you attack me at close range, I can make you roll 4 dice, which is awesome, especially after we just discussed this, because if you read this, while a friendly ship at distance 1 to 3 is defending at close range, so we've already determined range by the time it gets to attack, determine during the spend defense token step, which we now know is during step 5, which is when the defender can spend tokens, I can force a reroll. So if you attack me with a bunch of blue dice, and I force a reroll, and it comes up with accuracies, you can't use them. Ha ha ha. They're blanks. And then an interdictor, so then I can re-ready targeting scramblers and do it multiple times during a turn. And then that didn't work. I need to be able to go forward. Give me one sec. My next ship is an onager testbed because it is way undercosted. Intel officer because it's just kind of funny to make you discard tokens. The orbital bombardment particle cannons because then I can shoot longer range and I can put my ignition token at long range. And then the cataclysm title because it's a really good title, so you can like place exactly where you want the ignition token with the token at the beginning of the round. That's it. It's pretty much naked. All the rerolls come from Darth Vader, because for the most part, if I'm shooting you at extreme range, you're not going to be shooting me back, and I don't care if I'm spending like a salvo or something like that to get full rerolls on all my dice. It works out pretty well. And then, can I go? Yep. Cool. The next ship is the exact same thing, except no title. And that's because, again, Vader's giving me my rerolls, and I'm just trying to shoot people at long range and say that you can't use your tokens. Or you can, and then you can discard them. Next, we have a Gazanti with Hondo, which is primarily there just to give Cataclysm the Concentrate Fire in case I go first, and I can then lob a long, extreme range shot during the first turn, which is pretty nice. And then Comms Net to pass tokens out to whatever ship needs it whenever they need it. And that's it for the list. I'm not really going to go into what I would change in this list because honestly this list isn't what I wanted to play this game with. I originally had a triple onager list that I was planning on playing, and then in the chaos of both of our lives, Ken forgot his at home. He had it out, and then he just totally forgot it. So last minute, as we were setting up to record this game, I built this list in like the last 10 minutes. And you can actually see that when we play it, I start doing something, and then I'm like, that's not going to work. And then I completely shift gears and change what I'm doing, mainly because I really hadn't thought of how I was playing this list. It was just kind of, let's throw it on the table and see how it goes. So I'm going to spend most of my time here talking actually about Ken's list, because Ken actually made a lot of changes to his list based off the game we did. And he used this in that, don't quote me on it, it was either Vassal or Tabletop Simulator, or one of those two had a big international tournament that he took place in, and his team took third place, and he brought a modified version of his fleet like this to it. So this is his MC30 list. He, in this game, chose General Madine as his commander, which gives them even more maneuverability. Most of them are equipped the same. He has Ordnance Experts, Assault Concussion Missiles, Dual Turbolaser Turrets, and Foresight. Foresight is such a powerful upgrade in 1.5 with the new evade rules. Evades are already good in 1.5, and then it just like takes them to the 10th level of awesome. Personally, I do not like dual turbo laser turrets. Ken likes them. I think he eventually drops them. I have a copy of his list that he modified it to in the end. But yeah. The second one is pretty much equipped the exact same way, except it has advanced projectors, which kind of gives it a little bit of the same power as Foresight, because Foresight allows you to redirect to multiple locations, and so does this card. And then he has Admonition, which is good. You can just toss stuff to survive. Then the next ship is pretty much equipped the same way. This one, though, has Reactive Gunner, so you don't really want to shoot it when it gets in close range, and also Lando. And so if you look at all the ships across all of them, they each have an ability in defense to help them survive. And it's kind of spread out among all of them, so there's really not a good choice to attack any of these ships, which is frustrating if you're facing against it. Also, to note here, if you're going to be using a critical effect, such as ATPs or the concussion missiles, you should keep it the same across all of them. So all of Ken's ships, I'm going to go back, sorry, going fast. Concussion, concussion, concussion. Perfect. So now you're just trying to do the same thing. Or you could go the other route and do assault, proton, photon, proton, proton. Proton torpedoes 3 times. You just kind of want to keep it all synergized together, because the ATPs go through shields and the assault concussion eliminate a lot of shields. And if you're just trying to like pop criticals through shields, eliminating the shields on top of that makes no sense. So choose either or. The next ship is a Hammerhead Scout. Linked turbo laser towers with Gorell's Honor. Gorell's Honor is one of my favorite titles in the game, especially when you're able to run it into another ship. A lot of our comments on YouTube talk about how Ken should drop this, and he did. He was way ahead of you guys. He dropped this ship because when I get to how we played the game, you can see I kind of just focused in on it, killed it to kill a ship, and then flew off, because it's technically the weakest ship and easiest ship to kill compared to those super defensive MC30s. The next ship is a GR-75 medium with munitions resupplies, and I'm guessing his idea here was just to toss them all to the MC30s, and that's really it. Just one turn. Boop! Everyone gets a token. Peace. You're out of here. As they fly forward. GR-75 again with CommsNet, and that's to pass tokens, because passing tokens is a great thing to do during a game. And now we get to the game. And you can see here, hold on, let me go to objectives first. Did I pull objectives? I did. Okay, cool. So here's the objectives. I had the bid. I chose to go second because I had the interdictor, and it's just fun to play interdictor games with things. And I have Surprise Attack, Contested Outpost, and Doom Station, mainly for the fact that with Onagers, if I choose Surprise Attack, I will be hitting you turn 1 with Cataclysm, and you're kind of going to be stuck there for turn 2 as I bombard you. And it kind of means that I know exactly where you're going to go, because I get to say where you want to go. The next one is Contested Outpost. Because I have the interdictor, I can pull that outpost even closer to me, almost into my deployment zone, and I won't even have to move, and I'll be able to control the outpost even longer. Doom Station, it's kind of the same thing. I can just play around with the board however I want with the gravity wells of the interdictor. And you see I do that, and then you also will see that this is where my plan, I didn't have it fully worked out and it didn't work exactly. So Ken chose, out of these, the Doom Station. I can't really say if it was the right choice or a wrong choice because none of them are really good choices. At least it's a fun, different objective that we don't play as much on the channel. So I think we both appreciated that about it. Okay, so if you get to the game now, this is right after I've moved all obstacles. So look at where this station ended up, way over here by me. And so my idea here is to move forward, block it a little bit, do some shooting, and then fly off and just let that station sail right into the rift, destroying it, and then I only get points. Ken has this little bit of fortress set up over here, and this is where I really didn't know what I was doing because I was really planning on using a triple interdictor. So if you just imagine this line is triple interdictor all pointing like right here and trying to kill a ship, that's kind of what I had planned originally. And after turn 1, you can see that's what I would have been doing, which would be turning all these ships in and having like a group fire zone right here. And this is about the time that I realized that's not going to work with 2. I just don't think I was going to be able to punch through his defenses fast enough compared to how fast he was going to be able to kill me if I let another turn go by and these ships to slip into my side and behind me. So right about here is when I made the decision that I'm going to just try to kill this hammerhead that's right here and then run. Because it's going to be a challenge to kill all my big ships because they're all kind of tanky compared to like his smaller ships. So as you can see here I've decided to peace out and run. But because I did that, I started ramming myself, which held the station here for 1 turn longer than I wanted. I really wanted the station to be about where this rear of the onager right here is, so that it would be flying into the station and there's nothing to do that I could stop that. Ken has successfully landed into the rear arc of this onager, and the interdictor doctor and the targeting scramblers, though, is in range. That's what's great about it, is because it can almost completely negate any dice setting abilities or adding or re-rolling abilities that this MC30 has. So then we go into the next turn, and you can see I'm still trying to get this conga line that wasn't supposed to be something and to fly off. And now I'm like, I might as well take pot shots at these transports and earn some more points. And oddly enough, now Ken is earning points off my Doom Station, which shouldn't be allowed. No, it should be sailing smoothly into the gravity lift, but I pinned it again for another turn, which wasn't part of my plan, but I really didn't have a plan. And then we go to the next turn, and at this point the station is finally starting to move, but it's too late. His ships are just going to score the rest of it, and my ships are now out of range, and I'm still hunting down that Gazanti. And then this is kind of where the game ends, because he gets the station, I just get to fly off, and his ships don't really want to fly into me because it's just that first last I've eliminated enough of his activations, he won't be able to successfully do it against me. I will get shots off on him. And that is it for that. So, taking what we've learned from that, Ken heavily modified his list. And my picture is in the way, so give me 1 second. I have to adjust this so we can see it. There we go. Okay, so this is what Ken flew during his tournament that he used this list idea. He changed his commander. As you saw in our announcement poll, I asked what type of commander should Ken use, and our fan base actually voted very, very heavily in favor of Mon Mothma. And I'll get to it in a second why Mon Mothma could be good. but also not as good for certain reasons compared to Kraken. So Kraken's ability allows the ships to be treated as obstructed if they're going speed 3 or faster. For the most part, with MC30s, you're probably going to be cruising around at speed 3, so it just naturally links up with them and blocks 1 dice. When you think about blocking 1 dice compared to Mon Mothma, which allows for a dice at close range to be canceled, I actually think Kraken works better. And that is because that dice isn't even rolled, compared to Mon Mothma, who just can cancel a dice at medium range and re-roll 2 dice. And the reason for that is that accuracies really, really hurt MC30s. And if you're able to just block out a whole dice, it is better than trying to cancel a dice. Because if I'm rolling, let's just pretend you land yourself in front of a ISD2. I'm rolling 8 dice. And each of those dice has a chance to get an accuracy. If I get 2 accuracies, all I do is I block your 2 evades, and then Mon Mothma does nothing. But Kraken, with you going speed 3, will remove a dice from that, so then I'm only rolling 7 dice instead of 8 dice. And I still have the same basic chance. I actually have a little lower chance of getting the double accuracies to block both the evades. So it's kind of a give and take here. So I actually like Kraken here as the commander. So it's Kraken, Ordnance Experts, Assault Photon Torpedo. So he switched from Concussion, and he switched completely over to Assault Photon. Foresight, again, because Foresight's awesome. Then we have the MC30 with the Advanced Projectors and Lando. So he flipped what ship had that on it. And then he also has a ship that has Admo and Ordnance Experts and Assault Photons. So those are all just tanky little ships that do well. Then he has a GR-75 with Bomber Command. And then he has a fighter wing that's basically there to stop fighters from immediately decimating him. And if you don't have fighters, he can then try to bomb you with the Bomber Command. So he has Luke Skywalker, which will just ignore shields and get a crit or a hit right onto the hull. Big Starklight, which then you have that Biggs ball that you can pass damage around, and 4 X-Wings that he can pass damage around to. It's kind of just I will make it annoying for you to get through my fighters list. Then his objectives are Precision Strike, which works well with bombers, and the MC-30s that are doing the Assault Photon Torpedoes, so which can get a card through. And Luke Skywalker, who says, I just get a card through. And then an Abandoned Mining Facility that he can just sit there for a little bit, churn some points, go for an attack. And Dangerous Territory. So this is the list he used. I think that taking what he learned from our game and moving it over to this list is actually a lot better. So that's kind of my thoughts on this game and these lists. So I'm going to look at the comments and catch back up with that and see if any specific questions were asked, and I'll try to answer them. Give me one sec. Who's the best Imperial Admiral in your opinion? That would be Admiral Sloane. That's not even really a question. She's just absolutely the best. But that's because I play fighters. If you're playing like other things, other admirals start trickling in as being better for certain builds. But I pretty much only play competitively with squadrons, so Sloane is the best for me. Yes, so if you have a red, so jumping back to our first conversation about evades, if you have a red evade, that does not block you from spending / discarding. It's literally you're just saying, I'm going to spend it and discard it. So you do that as one little thing. So you can choose to do one, but if you're going to discard it anyway against a larger ship, you might as well affect 2 dice. Yeah, Ken. It was on your table. Hey, I Ken, sometimes it's important to bait attacks, and partially that's what Ken did with his Hammerhead. because if it were to have survived and were to be able to pin my ships there, then his MC-30s would be able to circle around the edges. So there's that. Is that on YouTube anywhere? Ken, I'm guessing you're talking about the Tabletop Simulator game. I think there's one game on there from one of the French channels that I don't recall the name, but I'm not positive on that. Honestly, it's very difficult to keep up with other Armada content. I honestly don't think I watch any Armada content or anything on YouTube. Now that I've started doing stuff for our channel, it's just very difficult to keep track of. Should have been TRCs on those scouts. Yes, TRCs on scouts is good. Personally, when I'm going for in-close combat and plan on rushing in and attacking, I prefer the other one. The name escapes me. It's not the scout, it's... Let me look it up. Torpedo, duh. So I prefer the torpedo, and then I like H9s on it to get that automatic accuracy with the blue dice, and then it can just automatically block one thing. That's my favorite, but with the MC-30 Scout, you can use TRC, but understand that is a limiting part of your defensiveness, so then they have very clear targets for their accuracies when they're shooting at you. I also like scouts with spinal armaments when I'm just goofing around with Sato, because with spinal armaments, then you have 2 dice out the front and 2 dice out each side. So then you can double arc with Sato, and those 2 red dice can then become black dice, and that's kind of fun. I don't remember if I've done that on the channel, though. I know for a fact that I've played Ken in eons past with it. Maybe that will be something that I will look back into to get back on the channel, which is some Sato MC-30s, because it's a fun list to play. So yes, he doesn't have enough ships for squad commands, but it's mainly there not to be commanded, but to just be, you can run your fighters into it, and it's probably not going to die. Like, even like a full-blown Sloan Alpha Strike list isn't going to be able to chew through 6 X-Wings that are Biggs powered fast enough that they're not going to automatically, during the squadron phase, be able to attack you back. Yes, I have not yet played with hyperspace rings personally or rapid launch bays in a while, but there is lists that are coming out probably in Season 2 that will include both of those things. And it's Ken just threw in there that, yes, that was his idea behind pinning the Onagers in place with the Hammerhead. Especially with Corell's Honor, you can ram and do that face-up damage, which works very, very well. Yep, so that is kind of it for that episode. I still don't like the Onager, and I can explain why I don't like the Onager. It's the same reason why a lot of people don't like Demo. It changes too much. It changes radically too much of the game. So the game a lot of times is just predicting like the math and damage potential that can be done to you at range, and then how much damage you can do back to their ships. And I think the idea of the Onager was to get rid of a lot of lists that would just sit there and fortress up on their side of the board and like drop to speed 0 because it's quote unquote not a fun play style because come get me, I'm second player. Things like Akbar Fish Farm, which had already been dealt with the flotilla nerfs. and things like interdictors that are just going to sit on the backfield and score points by pulling like contested outposts or something into them. So what they did is they made this artillery piece. They're like, this will end that. But then what it did is it made its own problem, because onagers are meant to be at speed 0 sitting in the deployment zone, but now they can shoot you across the deployment zone, which wasn't actually a problem with like Fish Farm or the interdictor. So they're actually a worse problem of what they were trying to fix. So that's just my gameplay analysis of why I don't like it from that point of view. I think it's also way undercosted. It's cheaper than any of the Star Destroyer versions, but it can throw more dice at longer range than any of the Star Destroyers. That doesn't make sense. It's also like one of the most maneuverable large ships in the entire game. That doesn't make sense for an artillery piece. Maybe make it speed 1 and then you can like pin it. Because as you saw, Ken came in me and I'm like, piece speed 3, maneuvered well out of all of the stuff with 2 large ships right back to each other. I just think that it makes a very unfun play experience to play against it. And when you compare it to like the Spats, the Spats have a lot of things that need to take place to actually make them work. So you have to place it, it's at close range, not long range, so it's harder to keep it in range because, you know, you're only putting it out like that far. And it only shoots out to medium, so technically it only goes about, I think, maybe 1 centimeter if you place it at farther is close and then you go until medium. It's like 1 centimeter into extreme range, which is not that far compared to like a long range ruler over long range with the Onager, with the orbital bombardment cannon. And then it exhausts. So now you have to build an engine inside your list to be able to get concentrate fire tokens every single turn to refresh it so that you can use it. So then you can then predict where the person's flying to use it, because you can't just like lob it in front and then, hey, look at this, you're at long range of me, and I get to throw a handful of dice at you. So it's more of a gimmicky puzzle to figure out, and I think that makes it rewarding. If they made the Onager so that there was like refresh and there was cost and there was actual skill in lining up ignition firing shots, I'd be cool with that. Or maybe even like put a token on it. On this turn you can place on these, every other turn you can place a ignition token out because it has to recharge. I would be more fine with that. But just because it automatically happens, it has a built-in ignition arc that you can use even without any of the weapons. It's technically close range, and can still shoot out long range. Just built in, you can just throw a 90-point ship down and it can throw at extreme range. That's crazy. It's just way undercosted. 90 points naked, and it can throw dice at longer than long range. What? That's why I'm not a fan of the ship. Because it fundamentally breaks the game with no side effects. No downside for the ship whatsoever. It's cheaper than all the other ships. It can throw more dice than any ships. It can shoot longer range than any ships. And it's strongest. Oh, but it's weak. Okay, cool. I get 3 turns of shooting at you before you come into range at me. That's my opinion. Okay, I'm going to go back to chat and see if anyone has said anything after me ranting about why I don't like the Onager. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you like the game. Game analyst. I can't even talk. I'm glad you're liking Backseat Admiral. And yeah, people also think it's underpriced by like 40 points. At least 40 points. Yeah, but you actually have to get into close range. And some fleets are just not capable of doing that. And when you just start stacking, you can just make it second player and choose obstacle or objectives that give it points every turn for sitting still, which was the whole reason I believe that this ship was invented, was to make it so that it was a bad idea to sit still on objectives inside your objective zone, so force people out to play the game. Well, the people that want to play the game and move out and fight get punished for it, because now the onager is the one sitting in the deployment zone scoring points. It kind of defeats the purpose. What's the best way to beat onagers? With onagers. What's the other counters? Really fast ships that can try to get beside it, if you can dodge the arc. But then I can just sit on my stuff and score points. Well, fighters can counter it. Okay, cool. So fighters can counter it. But if I bring Sloane in an onager, then I get the power of Sloane. My fighters are going to kill your fighters, and my onager is going to kill you before you can get in range of my carrier. So what do you need? You need another onager. So I don't know. There's a reason why you very rarely see it in our videos, because it just makes a unfun play experience. And that's just my opinion on it. So, I think that's about it for that video. There wasn't as much fun interactions as like our Plo Koon and Martuk episode, because those were a bunch of new cards that we were trying out for the first time in strategies, and this is mainly Ken's fleet, so Ken can talk more of the strategy, and then me just throwing down any old onager list and running away. So my strategy was sometimes it's better to run away and live than sit still and get murdered by 3 MC-30s all at once. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions that you would like answered, send them to me now. Otherwise, I'm probably going to wrap up. Yeah, I'm going to just talk real quick about if there are strategy ideas that you would like me to talk about, like I do at the beginning of these videos. Go ahead and send them to me in the comments of this video after it goes live. Sorry, let me rephrase. After we're done going live and it just becomes a YouTube video, because then I can see them easily and respond to them, or join us over at our Discord. I actually put links into the description of the video for this one, so you can find it. And you can join us there, and there's a whole Backseat Admiral section thread that I put up there, so if you have any thoughts or ideas for this or would like to see something, you can throw it up there, and they'll take a look at it and see what I can do. Looks like some questions are starting to roll on. I don't like the onagers, or yeah, just doesn't fit Rebels. What is the Clone Wars ship you are hoping to see made? So technically, I do not talk about what could be made or possibly be made or anything like that, because I was a playtester for what we've seen so far in the Clone Wars, and you can find me in the credits and all that fun stuff, so I just kind of stay away from it, because if I'm pulled in to be a playtester, I don't want to be out here saying, hey, maybe you'll see this, because it just puts me and the channel in a hard place. But there are lots of ships that can be made if they choose to make them. Yeah, so far I like everything that's been released so far. No, thank you. Watchful Owl. Ken and I both enjoy making videos, and I'm glad this has been positively received by our community, this Backseat Admiral, and just listening to me ramble about lists and different rules and things like that. What's my favorite archetype? That would be Fighter Heavy. I play Fighter Heavy in pretty much every single faction, so if we go each faction, my favorite is Sloane TIE Interceptor list for the Imperials. That's usually a 3-ship list, which is an ISD of Kuat or ISD-2 fashion, with a Quasar decked out and a Gazanti friend that's there to help, with a bunch of TIE Interceptors and some aces to help along. Personally, I always ran generics. Like a couple weeks back, we had the Sloan episode, and you see my list was primarily generics, and that's how it's always been. Because Sloan is kind of a hard counter to aces, because if you attack me, I can counter you with Sloan, spend your tokens, and then I attack you again with Sloan, and then your ship's dead. So when 2-ship and Sloan aces were very, very big, I would bring pretty much that list, and I would win all the squadron battles. And then once you have no squadrons, then my squadrons versus your ships, and our ships being pretty much the same, I could win almost all those matches. Then Rebels, I really like playing Y-Wing bomber list, which is kind of like my LVO list that I brought years ago now. There is a video on that list if you guys want to go way back near the beginning of our channel and see me talk about my strategy with that list. So far, I've really enjoyed Plo Koon's Y-Wings like you saw last week. That's really, really high up there on me. I'm still debating if I like Plo Koon on a Venator or if I like Plo Koon on double acclimators for pushing fighters. It's kind of back and forth. So I'm working through those ideas. And then I also very much so enjoy Tri-Fighter spam, kind of like taking the Bomber and the Imperial list into the CIS. So those are my 4 main archetype for fighters that I like for all of the factions. So I don't think we will ever see, I say that and then who knows what will happen. I don't think we'll see multi-faction ships. And the reason why I say that is a lot to do with an interview that took place during Gen Con a couple of years ago. And it was specifically a question that was asked to, I believe his name is Alex. He's one of the main Legion guys, and the question was related to Legion and all Star Wars games, if we would see cross-faction or a scum faction come to Armada or Legion, and the answer spoken for Legion and for Armada was a definite no. And the reason that they gave for that is almost every case of a bounty hunter in the Clone Wars or in the Civil War era was that bounty hunter was not fighting for themselves, that they were actually primarily employed by a specific faction, so they will just be including those individuals inside that faction. The only person that they were going to ever make cross-faction wise was Hondo. Again, all of the developers have been let go since the move to AMG, so who knows what will happen, but I kind of think that game design philosophy will probably stick. So, talking about, Muzzy just asked a question about Maydeen and does it make your command dials too obvious? And my statement to that is I honestly think your command dials should be very obvious, depending on what type of fleet that you're running. So if I'm running a Squadron Heavy list and I show anything but Squadron, that should be a surprise to you. Because it's better for me to die with no fighters on the table, revealing a Squadron command, than any other command because I'm a fighter build. When you're running a Maydeen list, more than likely you're running small ships that are trying to navigate into position, so you're going to be navigating. So it just kind of goes with what you're already doing. Out of the 4 commanders that I listed in our poll, which was Kraken, which is the one that Ken eventually chose for, and I already talked a little bit about why I feel that his defense capability is decent compared to like Mon Mothma, Maydeen, and Leia. I actually prefer Leia over Maydeen. And the reason for that is that you can then use other dials on other ships that aren't trying to navigate, like the transports, and then you could like push more fighters. Or you can then jump more speed and get more clicks, I believe, if you're using it as a dial token every single turn with Leia. Or if you really, really need to switch over to engineering to get rid of card, you automatically get the dial and the token. So Leia, actually, I think would be my second pick for this fleet. First would be Kraken, second would be Leia, third and fourth would be tied between Maydeen and Mon Mothma. Yeah, Baseball Nut basically just said what I said, always be navigating with these type of ships. I probably will be doing a video on my thoughts on commands and stacking and planning ahead in the future, so we'll go there. So, Steve just said that he likes putting the skilled first officer on MC30s, and then you can alternate between Confire and Nav. I feel that actually very rarely, I don't know if I've ever built a ship with first officer. I think I did it once when I was experimenting with building a Sloan list with a Quasar. And the reason for that was when I went to Worlds, the last actual Worlds that took place, I played Sloan. And I was ready to kill 2-ship, because, 2-ship was going to be everywhere. And then I played, like, one person with 2-ship, and all I placed was Radis builds and Riken Ace-Hole lists. And they all brought slicer tools, so my Quasar got sliced and just kept getting sliced, and I wasn't able to activate any of my squadrons, which was super frustrating. So after that, I started experimenting with skilled first officer to discard the top, but then it started not mattering because they all had 2 slicers usually in their fleets, and then my top dial would be whatever it was, so they would give me like an engineering or something I'm not going to use on a Quasar, and then I would activate the ship because they out-deployed me, and then they move another slicer in, and then they would slice my now top dial. So first skilled officer would only buy me really 1 turn. I switched over to that very rarely used 6-point upgrade card that allows me, before I reveal a dial, to change it to a squadron, and I got a lot more use out of that type of card. So, yeah, that's about it. Let me see, because I've talked about how this show doesn't necessarily have a set date because of life and work and things like that. So while our first time was on a Monday and today's a Sunday, the next time I'll probably be doing a Backseat Admiral will be on Tuesday the 17th. That's just due to work schedule and life for me. So this will probably be Tuesday the 17th, the next episode of this, which will give you guys plenty of time to watch our next video that will come out. If you are one of our Patreon members, you will already know what we are releasing for this whole month, because we post that up there as one of the rewards. And Ken and I usually release the Wednesday before Friday releases a little bit of a preview of what that episode will be. And that's also the same time that it goes live for our Patreon members, so they can get early access. So if you would like to become a Patreon member, there's a link down below. Like the video, comment on the video. I'm pretty much here. This is a very good way for me to directly answer any questions that you guys have. You can throw me questions onto the comments of this video, any of our other videos, or come join us on Discord, where you can ask me directly into the Backseat Admiral section of our Discord, anything you would like to cover. I'm going to be thinking about what I want to cover for next week and work on it in the next week or two. I have a couple extra days because the next episode will be on a Tuesday. So thank you very much for joining me tonight and listening to me ramble about our lists and some attack sequence rulings. So this has been Ion Radio. Thank you very much for watching.